The Real Review, Warbucks. Welcome to The Real Review on Damn Good Radio, and I am your host, Warbucks. Tonight we are stepping into the dark, murky waters of the human condition. We are peeling back the layers of comfort to find the rot underneath. The movie we are diving into today is Together, released in 2025. Now, before we even touch the celluloid, before we discuss the frame rate or the lighting rigs, we have to situate ourselves in the cultural moment. The year is 2025. The horror genre has been undergoing a metamorphosis. We have seen the rise of elevated horror in the late 2010s, the slasher resurgence of the early 20s, and now we seem to be entering an era of somatic anxiety. We are obsessed with the body, the betrayal of the flesh, and Together lands right in the center of this zeitgeist. It is a film that has generated whispers, not shouts. It did not explode onto the scene with $100 million marketing campaign. It crept in, it slithered into the theaters and streaming queues, largely on the back of its lead actor and a premise that feels uncomfortably familiar to anyone who has ever stayed at a party or a partnership about an hour too long. We are talking about a film directed with a very specific claustrophobic intent. The buzz around Together has not been about its jump scares, though they exist. The buzz has been about its audacity to mix the genre of mumblecore relationship drama with the visceral grotesque of body horror. It is a bold cocktail. It is a flavor profile that does not always sit right on the tongue, but it is certainly not bland. I have been sitting with this film for a few days now, letting it digest, and tonight we are going to dissect it organ by organ. So pour yourself something strong, dim the lights, and let us talk about what happens when forever becomes a curse. The full experience, thoughts, and standouts. Let us get into the meat of it. The texture, the experience of watching Together. On paper, the premise is deceptively simple. It is the classic dichotomy, almost a cliche of romantic dramedies, but twisted into a nightmare. We have a couple. They have been together for years. You know the type. They finish each other's sentences, not out of romance, but out of boredom. They know exactly how the other person chews, breathes, sleeps. The dynamic is stark. We have the female lead. Let us call her the anchor. She is the corporate climber, the breadwinner. She has the sharp blazers, the high-stress phone calls, the bank account that keeps the lights on. She is grounded in reality, perhaps to a fault. Then we have the drift, played by none other than Dave Franco, and I have to pause here. I know many of you, myself included, bought the ticket specifically for Franco. There is a charm to him, a boyish vulnerability that he has weaponized over his career. In Together, he plays the dreamer, the guy with no job but a million ideas, the guy chasing the horizon while standing still. The film does an incredible job of establishing their history without a single flashback. It is in the acting. It is in the way they navigate their shared apartment. It feels lived in, but not in a cozy way, in a suffocating way. The set design deserves a nod here. The apartment is cluttered with the detritus of a long-term relationship, books stacked on books, mismatched mugs, clothes draped over chairs. It feels claustrophobic. Cinematographically, the director makes a choice to shoot in tight, shallow focus. We are rarely given a wide shot to breathe. We are trapped in the frame with them. The lighting starts warm, almost romantic, the golden hour of a relationship. But as the runtime ticks on, as the question of should we break up begins to fester, the lighting shifts. It becomes sterile, cold blues, sickly greens. The shadows in the corners of the room seem to lengthen, concealing things that should not be there. Let us talk about the convenience. That is the silent killer in this film. You see scenes where they laugh, where there is genuine chemistry, and both actors do a phenomenal job here. You believe they were once madly in love, But then the camera lingers. The smile fades a second too quickly. The eyes drift away. They are trying to make it work, not because it is working, but because the alternative, separating their lives, dividing the record collection, being alone, is too terrified to contemplate. And then the body horror begins. This is not a slasher. It is not a zombie flick. It is a slow mutation. The film posits a terrifying question. If two people are wrong for each other but refuse to separate, does nature step in? The horror here is physical manifestation of emotional stagnation. Without spoiling the specific gore, though you know I love the gore, the way the film handles the merging of their lives is literal. There are moments where the sound design takes over, the squelch of skin, the cracking of bone. It is subtle at first. A rash, a wound that will not heal, but it evolves. The brilliance of the movie, and frankly, the only reason it kept me glued to the screen from beginning to end, is this creative decision to treat a failing relationship as a biological disease. Dave Franco, I have to say, he carries the weight of this. We see his dreamer persona begin to rot. His optimism becomes a physical deformity. It is a performance that requires him to be charming and repulsive simultaneously. However, I will say this, and this is where the experience wavers. There are moments where the film feels like it is spinning its wheels. It drags. You feel the runtime. You feel them trying to stretch a short film concept into a feature, but just when you check your watch, the director hits you with a visual so jarring, so creatively grotesque that you are pulled back in. It is a movie that is okay. It is not a masterpiece, but the character study, the analysis of a relationship through the lens of Cronenberg-esque mutation, that is smart. That is where the gold is buried. The philosophical core, the message. Now, let us ascend. Let us leave the gore on the floor and look at the soul of Together. What is this movie actually trying to tell us? Because if you think this is just a movie about monsters or infections, you are missing the signal for the noise. The central message of Together is a scathing indictment of the sunk cost fallacy in romance. It is a cautionary tale about the sheer, unadulterated horror of sticking it out. We live in a society that valorizes longevity. We applaud the couple that has been together for 50 years, regardless of whether they have been happy for 50 years. Together challenges that narrative. It suggests that staying in a relationship past its expiration date is not a virtue. It is a violation of the self. Think about the characters, the anchor and the drift. They are both paralyzed by fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the dating market, the fear of silence in an empty apartment. So what do? They choose the devil they know. They choose convenience. And the film punishes them for it. The horror elements, the jump scares, the bodily transformations are symbolic punishments for their cowardice. The movie is screaming at the audience, move on, grow, evolve. I feel like both characters wanted to do other things in their lives. The woman wanted to ascend in her career, to find an equal who could match her ambition. The man wanted to chase his dreams, to find a muse, or perhaps just the freedom to fail on his own terms. But their relationship acted as a gravity well, a black hole. By staying together, they did not just stall, they began to cannibalize each other's potential. This is a deep sociological study. In 2025, we are more connected than ever, yet we are terrified of disconnection. We hold on to people like life rafts, even if the raft is full of holes and dragging us down. The director uses body horror to show that this codependency is ugly, it is not romantic, it is a tumor. When they say, I cannot live without you, the movie asks, is that a promise or a threat? It delivers this message in such a unique way. Usually, relationship dramas end with a tearful breakup at an airport or a wedding. Here, the inability to break up leads to a literal loss of humanity. It is a metaphor for how we lose our identities when we subsume ourselves into a dysfunctional partnership. You stop being you and me and become this grotesque, malfunctioning us. The obsessive, deep dive, missed details. All right, class is in session. put on your reading glasses. It is time for the obsessive deep dive. You watch the movie, but did you see the movie? Because Together is littered with breadcrumbs that most people swept right past. First, let us talk about the costume design. Did anyone notice the color palette evolution? In the first 10 minutes, the anchor is wearing crisp whites and cool blues. Dave Franco, the drift, is in warm earth tones, messy browns, and oranges. As the movie progresses and they become more enmeshed in their toxic cycle, their clothes literally start to swap color palettes, but in muddier, grayer tones. By the third act, they are both wearing variations of a sickly, bruised purple. It is a visual representation of their identities bleeding into one another until everything is just a bruise. Let us talk about the background details. The apartment walls. In the beginning, there are photos of them everywhere, happy photos. But if you look closely at the background of the shots in the second act, the photos change. The director replaced the smiling photos with photos where one of them is blinking or looking away or slightly out of focus. It is a subliminal trick to make you feel the disconnect before the characters even speak it. And the sound mixing. This is a detail for the audio files. Whenever the anchor talks about her job, her escape, her individuality, the background noise of the city is clear. Traffic, birds, life. But whenever they are discussing their relationship, the sound mixer layered in a very low frequency hum, almost like a refrigerator buzz or a dying fluorescent light. It creates a subconscious irritation in the viewer. You feel annoyed, you feel on edge, just like they do. Also, a blink and you miss it Easter egg. On the drift's bedside table, there is a book. You can barely see the spine. But if you freeze frame it, the title is The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, a cheeky nod from the director about a man who wakes up to find himself transformed into a monstrous vermin, becoming a burden to his family. It perfectly mirrors Franco's character arc. A man whose stagnation makes him a monster in the eyes of the woman who supports him. These are the details that elevate a standard horror movie into something that had actual thought put behind it. It is not just blood and guts. It is a meticulously crafted environment of decay. The final verdict, which brings us to the judgment, the moment of truth. I have wrestled with this one. On one hand, Together is a smart, creative, and poignant character study. It takes a risk. It uses the genre of body horror to tell a very human story about the tragedy of convenience. The acting is solid. Dave Franco does exactly what we need him to do. He charms us, then he horrifies us. The female lead holds her own as the grounding force of the narrative. However, the pacing, the movie feels like it is running in quicksand in the second act. It repeats its own points. We get it. They are unhappy. We get it. They are scared. It hammers the message a few too many times before the finale. And while the practical effects are good, there are moments where the budget shows, where the ambition of the script exceeded the grasp of the special effects department. It is an okay movie. It is not a bad movie. It kept me watching, but it is not a classic. It is a film you watch once, you nod at the metaphor, you maybe text your ex, and then you move on. Therefore, for the popcorn bucket score, I am giving Together a 3 out of 5 popcorn buckets. It sits right in the middle. Better than the mindless slashers cluttering the streaming services, but lacking the tightness and the pure cinematic mastery to break into the upper echelon of the genre. If you like Dave Franco, or if you are currently in a relationship, you are trying to find a reason to leave, this movie is a 4. For everyone else, it is a solid 3. The sign off. And that, my friends, puts a wrap on this edition of The Real Review. I want you to take a moment tonight. Look at the person sitting next to you on the couch. Look at the choices you have made. Are you together because you are growing, or are you together because you are rotting? It is a heavy question, but that is what we do here on Damn Good Radio. We do not just watch the movies, we let the movies watch us. I am Warbucks. Keep your popcorn buttered, keep your standards high, and remember, sometimes the scariest thing in the world is not the monster under the bed. It is the person sleeping in it.